I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Hi, everybody. Ron here from The Truth About Addiction. Today's guest is Benjamin Lerner. Benjamin's living in America. Benjamin's an advocate of, I like what he said before, getting clean out loud, and sharing the message. And, he's got a great message. He's one of these people that walks the walk. He just doesn't talk the talk, and that's what I like. And that's why I asked him to come on this podcast. So, Benjamin, welcome to The Truth About Addiction, my friend.
Oh, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm blessed to connect with you, blessed to be here and able to share my story.
Yeah, good word, blessed. I like that word.
Well, it really is. And, before we talked, you said, hit the record button, as it were. You said, well, we're just going to jump into your story. And I like that because, it's a cool format. But before I ever tell my story, be it in the rooms, outside, at an event, in a reel, whatever, I like to take just a moment, not even a moment of silence, but just like a moment to ground myself in the fact that being here today, no matter how bad or good my day is, I'm just blessed to be breathing regardless of anything else, because most people who go through, and I don't want to speak for I'll speak for me, but what I went through and what I've seen reflected in my friends, that even though I'm not them and we have different experiences, I see myself reflected in their experiences of the dozens of friends who are no longer with us. Yeah. I know it's a miracle every breath that I take. So knowing that, I guess I always start off my story with the same sentence, which is something that took me a lifetime to understand, even though on some level I knew it from the moment I first realized it, which was that I was an addict and an alcoholic before I ever took my first drink or drug.
Yep.
And what that means is that I was always looking for an external solution to an internal problem. So before I knew that I could self-medicate with mind-altering substances, I'm a late-stage millennial born in the early 90s in America. So it was Super Mario, it was Pokemon, it was Beanie Babies. It was all those compulsive things that didn't change my mind chemically from the outside, but from the inside. The endorphin, the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin when I got a hug from my parents. Nothing wrong with that. But they unknowingly also, they were good parents, but the way my mind worked as someone with the disease of addiction, as I understand it through my own lens, and also born with what I was diagnosed with. And people have their opinions about mental health diagnoses and overdiagnoses, especially in America with the prevalence of medication. But I was diagnosed from an early age with autism spectrum disorder. And diagnoses aside, what that means is I have a propensity to take an external stimulus, such as a sound, such as someone talking to me, such as someone looking at me, and magnify it by 100 times and go off in this mental tailspin. And before I ever used drugs, I could arrest it by playing video games, by getting approval from someone, by purchasing someone, getting a little hit from that, consumer edge of getting something and attaching its value to me. And it was like a perfect storm of feeling like I was incredibly unique, but not special at the same time. Both of my parents were incredibly, I don't want to say intelligent people, but they valued intellectualism and they didn't care what I did, but they made it very clear to me from an early age that if I was going to do something, I was going to be good at it. And that insecurity and my inability to meet not the standards of what they set, because they got divorced. I dealt with some trauma everybody does. My mom's an alcoholic. My dad's a classic stoic man. And that kind of had friction or whatever with their divorce. But my life was great, man. I wasn't a billionaire, but I came from privilege. I like to say we didn't own the shopping mall, but we sure as hell shopped there. But still, I took these external stimuli, right? Good and bad. And I magnified them in my head times 100. So if there was an external stressor, I magnified it 100 times and I started self-medicating with the external things. So at the point when I finally understood what alcohol did, and it wasn't just a innocent, curious sip of beer or something for the taste, but when I had drank before and I knew what it did, and I drank to seek out that feeling that it gave me of warm, fuzzy oblivion, it was like a door had been unlocked. It was like I could finally feel okay within myself, but it came at a price. And the price was that every single step that I could have taken towards self-actualization, every coping mechanism without a chemical, or beyond that, an external solution that I could have built, was instantly erased in a flood of alcohol, a pile of weed, a pile of coke, a pile of ecstasy. I'm not going to drug-a-log too much, but I grew up in DC in the thousands when I was using, this is like dirty South hip hop. This is like peak hedonism, you know, post 9/11 era, you know, the dawn of social media, the dawn of like post, you know, I don't want to call anything out, but the same way I would wear a logo on my shirt from a store at the mall, I would carry a logo of a liquor bottle in, drinking underage from a party. And I wasn't just the dude with a fancy shirt. I was the dude with the fancy bottle. I was the dude with the fancy, like, name brand weed bag. And I had low self-esteem, but the same way I dressed up in fancy clothes to get the approval of my peers, I masked my low self-esteem, not just with my possessions, but with these liquor bottles, these designer drugs, and this designer alcohol, which was a material extension of my worth. And that became my identity, because my identity was all external. I didn't have self-esteem. I was a functionally autistic kid who was incredibly insecure, mind running 100 miles a minute. But if I could get this projected image of this alligator shirt, this Gucci belt, this Patron tequila bottle, this Bubba Kush weed, and like create this false temporary identity, I could go through the door in the party and I could be that guy, even though I didn't believe I was anything. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy because, you know, I'm not gonna say us, me as an addict, I've always been good at chameleoning to situations. And even though I don't have the best social skills, obsessing about a certain situation, be it social, be it climbing a specific, like, you know, job ladder, social ladder, and figuring out how I can fit into it and get what I want. And so I skirted by school at the edge of my teeth. The one thing I was passionate about and good at, well, the two things were music and words, because they run in my family and I had a natural knack for that. So even though I didn't study at all, do homework, I could ace a paper like nothing, and that fed into my false ego personification. But I graduate high school, you know, at the time I'm drinking a fifth of vodka every weekend day, but I'm, you know, a functional alcoholic, whatever that means. It hasn't gotten to the point where like I needed to get out of bed in the morning. I still have these delusions, like even though I'm using drugs and liquor to escape, that it's justified, because I thought if people only knew, like, you know, the type of anxiety I had, the type of insanity and pain and insecurity and anxiety going on in my head, they wouldn't just like get out of my way. They would subsidize my alcohol and drug use. But the consequences keep mounting. I get into this incredible conservatory program, full ride. My parents and grandparents are paying for it. And I drop out within 3 months to smoke weed, drive around the country, cashing out checks for the college account, draining every cent my parents put aside for me to smoke, drink, snort coke, and pretend that I was still in college, visiting all of my friends and projecting this false image of money that wasn't mine. Really, I'm a loser stealing it from my parents. Name brand clothes that ain't mine. Really, they're paying for it. I'm pretending I'm some fancy drug dealer, but really my habits more than anything I'm making pretend to sell drugs. And I get knocked off my high horse by fate. And it happened at the right time, because my alcohol use was escalating, and I got in a multiple car crash accident, DUI, when I was 19, a year after I dropped out of school. And at the time I was making music. I had a promising beginning of a career in hip hop, nothing too crazy, couple 100,000 YouTube views, doing some shows, opening for big acts, couple big collabs, but I cared more about the drugs, and that whole reality of like, you know, fake rich boy rapper came to a screeching halt when that car slammed into the other cars. But I'll be real with you. When I slammed into those cars in early 2012, before opioids or any really hard drugs ever came into the picture, I didn't care about the other people I hit. Thank God they were okay. I didn't care about the fact that cops were on the way. I didn't care about the fact the car that wasn't even mine was totaled. My first thought was, I'm not going to be able to drink and use today. I didn't care about anything but that. There was no liquor in the jail cell. There was no weed or coke in the jail cell. And my privileged family bailed me out, and I sulked all the way home, and I knew my life was over, but I'm a manipulative addict. So I stopped drinking to get out of the situation, and I conned my way into my family paying for a cheaper school out in San Francisco, California. But the cruel hand of fate dealt me an invisible hand again, which was I hadn't had my wisdom teeth out and they all came in impacted, and I needed major dental surgery. And the one line I wouldn't cross at that point, even though I had done crazy amounts of party, drugs, and drinking, was I would not do pharmaceuticals. I thought I had this kind of like irrational thing that I was a high bottom alcoholic. I was an uptown pothead. I was a private school coke fiend, and Xanax and oxys and dope were for people that just wasn't me. But when I got the wisdom teeth taken out, the dentist said, you can't drink alcohol, it's abrasive. You can't smoke weed or smoke cigarettes because the clots will get sucked out by the suction. And he gave me a different solution. They didn't come in a weed bag or a liquor bottle. It came in a pill bottle. And he gave me a little bit too much of it. I'm not blaming him. I would have eventually gone there anyway. But it was before the peak of the opioid epidemic and the Purdue Pharma lawsuits and all that. And fentanyl hit the street and all that. And long story short, this is in 2012 after I had that DUI accident, and I'm awaiting trial, kind of skipping to the West Coast to get away from consequences. Within 4 weeks of taking my first Percocet pill, I was pawning everything I had for Roxy pills on the street because my college rate dorm room that my parents had paid for me for was 4 blocks away from one of the most notorious open air drug markets in the entire world. And that's the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And they got documentaries about it now recently because of the fentanyl crisis. They're sending in the California Highway Patrol and the National Guard to arrest the drug problem there because it's gotten so bad. And at the time, it wasn't quite as bad, but it was bad. And that's the first year I went to rehab. You know, my family noticed I wasn't doing okay. I couldn't rationalize it anymore, but I wasn't ready when I went. Whole time I was in rehab, I was poking holes in the fellowship meetings they made me go to with the speakers they brought in. I was rationalizing that I was too smart. I was too unique. I was wound too tight. These people aren't creative like me. These people aren't smart like me. I thought I could outsmart my addiction. And to tell the truth, when I got out, I was able to somehow moderate my use out of pure spite, resentment, and trying to prove people wrong. But here was the problem. It wasn't that I couldn't have one pill or one drink when I got out of there. It was that I was miserable when I did, and the obsession of trying to control it, I couldn't enjoy it. So when I realized that even though I could somewhat control my use, I didn't want to. My use skyrocketed and got worse than it ever did before. Every single line I thought I would not cross. Crack, heroin, IV heroin, smoking pills off of tinfoil. I went from private school, Queen Mary cruise ship trips, you know, going to Broadway shows that my great-grandfather wrote and seeing Oscar statuettes on the mantle, going to Martha's Vineyard vacations with the sons of senators I went to private school with in D.C., to hobbling around with track marks and abscesses in my legs and my hands and my feet, crawling around picking cigarettes up off the street, getting change slapped out of my hands by corner boys in the Tenderloin, laughing at me, saying, pick that crack up and pay me back tomorrow. Get the hell out of here. And I still thought I was justified in my use because the same way with the alcohol and the crash, I thought if these people only knew the amount of pain I was in, they wouldn't just force me to go to they wouldn't force me to go to rehab. They wouldn't force me to go to therapy. They would pay for my bag of dope and they would smile doing it. But then one day the drugs didn't work. It wasn't that I ran out of money. I was still good at conning my family and the people around me. And by that point, it had gotten a little realer and I had real connects in the street. I'm not going to brag about drugs, but I became the plug. I became, not in a crazy Scarface way, but I became the guy that I used to respect. But I hated myself more than ever because even though I was going down in the hood, copping from people with pistols and like, you know, before face tats were just something every rapper had, like real prison dudes, like real hard dudes. And like, I was so desensitized to it, but I bought 500 worth of, you know, dope, 500 worth of white. I was in this motel room with my friend and I hit myself and I didn't feel anything. I felt physical high. I did not feel spiritual. I did not feel emotional high. And I've been to rehab inpatient once, outpatient 5 times, Suboxone, therapy, every promise to my parents, every negative consequence short of a long prison sentence, and none of that did anything. But when that needle hit full of good dope and I didn't go to the place I wanted to go, that scared me. And I called the treatment center for myself with a needle in my arm, but I called them. And I almost left halfway through because I made the dumb decision of getting involved in a rehab romance with a girl there. But I was sitting in that room there in the treatment center, and I had convinced my family, manipulative addict I am, even though I'm detoxed off of dope finally after weeks of throwing up and convulsing in my sleep. I just want to leave because now I'm getting high off of someone else. The same high I used to get from approval from people and Pokemon cards has come back in the form of a codependent love. And even though I've known her only for a week, she doesn't want to talk to me because of a rumor. I'm ready to bolt because I don't have the drugs to medicate my feelings anymore. But I see this mirror in this desk, in this room, in this rehab, right? And I look at myself and I don't like what I see because I can lie to everyone else to convince myself I've convinced them, but I can't lie to me. And I like to say that's the day I really got sober because I didn't know what was on the other side. I didn't know that I would reconcile with that girl, even though we didn't end up together. I didn't know that when I got out of treatment, my family would be okay with me. I just knew that I didn't want to run away from the truth anymore with drugs or just running away in general. So I got out, and my family in my absence, they didn't know about the full extent of my drug use, the needles, the tinfoil, the crack pipes, all that. But my mom found my paraphernalia stash, and there was no hiding it from anything, no more enabling. And she paid for a couple months for me at a recovery house. She helped me do outpatient treatment to stabilize myself. And thank God she did, because from there, every single thing I was afraid to do in active addiction was what I ran towards in recovery. That same anxiety and fear that used to push me towards the block, the needle, the pipe, all that, pushed me towards the solution in recovery, pushed me to overcome my mental shortcomings and handicaps that I used to justify my use with. And it was hard, man. There were days when, I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. It felt like the whole world was against me. I would hobble to a bus stop, same as I did with, the friggin' abscesses in my legs from shooting black tar in my legs just because I was so tired. And I would go to treatment and I'd have the bus water splash on me. I'd go apply to a job, get the door slammed in my face. I'd have my skin flare up because hormones surging because I got the drugs out of my system. Hate the way I look, hate the way I feel, hate the way people treating me. But the same voice that made me used to go to the block said, keep going. And I kept going. I put one foot in front of the other. I put my faith in recovery fellowships that I'm not going to state today for anonymity purposes, but they saved my life and they're a big part of my recovery. I worked with someone. I took inventory. I moved past some of my defects. I made whatever amends I could, some of them living amends, most of them living amends, because a lot of the people I wronged either didn't want to talk to me, had died of overdoses, or just, weren't here in my life anymore. But at the end of it, at the end of that process, I completed rehab. I was working weirdly enough as a bartender, 2.5 years clean. And I had taken a break from music and all my passions to get my life back in recovery because I didn't care about clout anymore. I didn't care about the logo on the shirt. I cared about what was underneath that logo in my heart. But life has a serendipitous way of putting us towards, whatever we're really passionate about. And before we were talking, I talked about a house that my dad built in the 70s in Vermont. And he gave it to me when I was 1.5 years clean, when we started rebuilding our relationship as a token of the trust we had reformed. And he gave me the keys, and I started taking care of it while I was living in Washington, D.C., about 300 miles to the south of that. But going back and forth, something would break every time. The cold winter, a pipe had burst, and I was like, enough. But I didn't know how to move up there. I didn't really know anyone up here, and I didn't know how to get a job. But when I was visiting, fixing something, a friend I knew from my childhood, I did not invite him to the house. He just drove up there. I don't even think he knew I was there. He just saw the car pull up or something. And he introduced me to a friend of his that had a recording studio here. And I hadn't seriously made music in years. And it turns out the dude was a doctor. And he had just been to an opioid summit here in Vermont about how the opioid epidemic was affecting the community. And this doctor, weirdly enough, was also a former Broadway producer who produced music and owned a recording studio. So we started working together as a doctor and addict and producer and musician. And he hired me for an arts fellowship, and I moved up from DC here, and the rest is history, man. And He's just been my mentor for the past couple of years, putting me towards the journey of advocating for recovery. I always liked sharing openly in sobriety fellowship events. I always liked helping people, but I guess I was afraid that the remaining stigma would make it that people wouldn't want to hear recovery music. They wouldn't want to hear recovery reels. And it's only 7 years ago, but as you know, you've been in this game for a minute, like the enduring stigma against recovery and addiction had made it that recovery content online is something fairly new. So I'm fairly new to this recovery content thing, man. I've been making recovery music. I've written a recovery column for several years. I've done gigs at high schools. But the same moment, and I'm going to end with this, the same moment that I had when I first walked into a recovery fellowship of, wow, these people get it, is the moment I had when I started opening my mind to the messages that were out there from other people in recovery online, because I thought I'm not a social media guy. But when I saw the breadth of experience, and not just creators, not just podcasters, but people sharing experience, strength, and hope in the comments, that made me realize that we're in a new place now, man, where people can truly share and pour their souls and their hearts into telling their stories of recovery, and the families too, and people in active addiction too. So if there's anybody listening, I'm not egotistic enough to think my life has a narrative or a story, but the three things I would say are: put your passion first, run towards the truth, and if nobody's told you today, you deserve to be alive, sober, and happy, man, because I wish I had someone saying that in my ear when I had the needle in my arm and nothing but sadness, emptiness, and hate for everyone and myself in my heart. Recovery is possible, recovery is beautiful, and I'm blessed to be here. One love, that's my story.
Yeah, really nice, brother. Nice. You touched on a lot of stuff. To me, we have got a massive problem, in the world today with fentanyl. I had a stepbrother who died of fentanyl, shooting that shit up. I had a sister who died from oxys. They're the legal drugs. I'm old school. I'm a heroin addict, and that was my drug of choice, and all the rest were my drug of no choice. I had to change the way I felt. So it didn't matter if there was no heroin, and I couldn't see any in the next 24 hours, I would use something else. But primarily, I'd wait because I didn't want to mess up my rush. And something you talked about was the day the drug stopped working is when the day my world collapses. Because I was always a drug smuggler, and all my associates were drug smugglers. And there's a funny story back in the 70s. My friend had got a lot of heroin into the country, and they came in little 10-gram bags. They used to come from a place called Penang in Asia. And I'm the only person that had the drugs. They're like a sausage bag. And halfway through the using, they'd stop working. And I started to try to work out how someone had broken into my home and cut the dope. Because it was my mentality, like, fuck, they must have cut the dope somehow. Somehow somebody's messed with the dope. But it wasn't somebody had messed with the dope had stopped working. It stopped covering up what I was trying to cover up, And for anyone who's been addicted, realizes that's a horrible day in your using career, and it's a wonderful day in your start of your recovery, because now we have to start looking outside of ourselves again to something to heal the inside, and I've said in my whole life that it's an inside job. Recovery is an inside job, and it's not about having time up and having abstinence. Recovery is about doing work. My program I run by 8 demands, and my whole life revolves around these 8 demands. And it's openness, acceptance, reliability, congruence, thoroughness, consistency, respect, and honesty. And those 8 demands are the 8 elements of trust. If you can work those in your life, people trust you. If you can get those 8 elements into your soul, you trust you. And at the end of the day, this is a really important program of self-trust, of self-worth, of self-love. Because until I learned to love myself, I couldn't love anybody else. Until I learned to trust myself, I couldn't trust anybody else. Because I was that guy that I didn't trust anybody, man. Nobody. I wasn't the guy that gave you my money and you went down the road and scored. I had a shot. If the date was good, I paid you. And sometimes I had a shot, and if the date was good, I robbed you. Because that's my nature, man. You know, that's my nature. I say to people now, you know, don't think because I haven't had a drug for a long time that I'm any different. If we pick up today, come next Saturday, I'm ripping you off. Because if it comes between me being sick and you being stoned, guess what? You're not getting stoned. Because I'm not going to get sick. You know, I had a revelation in 1974. I had a revelation when I first found out that I was addicted to drugs. Because I never had information. You guys are a lot luckier than us in some ways and less fortunate in others. But we'd never had any education. And NA wasn't going in Australia. And there wasn't any information. So I'd been using intravenous heroin. And this morning I woke up and I didn't have my morning injection and I started vomiting. And I thought I must have had food poisoning from the night before. And my drug dealer, who worked for me because I was a drug dealer, but I was selling pot, and then I started selling heroin. He started laughing. He goes, "Nah, man, you're just hanging out. You just need a shot." And I made a decision that day. Never, ever run out of this shit. Because when you run out, you get sick. You know, a sane person wouldn't think that. A sane person would be like, "Wow, that's disgusting. I'm physically addicted to this stuff and I'm chemically got handcuffs." But my addict brain went, "Oh, that's easy. Never run out." So over the next 10 years, I only ever detoxed in prison. I never went to voluntary detox. The only time I ever detoxed was when I was arrested, put back into the prison system. You dry out, you do all the training, you get super fit, and you say to yourself, it's going to be this different this time. You get released and you can't live life on life's terms. You have one just for the road. And it got to a stage where I'd get out of prison and I'd inject and I'd say, remanded for sentence. Because I knew it was only a matter of time before I was arrested again. You know, it became that sad that prison officers would say to me, "See you soon, Ron." And I'd come back to jail and my mates would be like, "Hey, man, geez, you've done really well. You stayed out for nearly 3 months." Like, you know, really proud that the fact that you'd stayed out of prison for nearly 3 months. And when you look at that now, it's quite sad. And yeah, I talk about a dream I had when I was in my last relapse in 1985, 86 actually. And in March of 1986, I had 2 dreams. I have twin daughters, they're 40, and I met their mum in rehab. It was another one of them rehab romances, and they're 41 years of age now. And they were 2.5 years of age when I relapsed. And I had a dream that I was walking down the street holding their hand, walking down the beach, and they were about 6 or 7. So that was my higher power's way of giving me that I was going to still be alive in another 4 years, because I didn't believe I would be. I was on a thing called methadone, you know, on a maintenance program. And the girl I was using with, I told her the dream, and she was like, "Oh, shut up, mix up another shot, you know, so don't be an idiot." And the next night I had another dream that I'd passed away, that I'd died. And I was going through wherever you're going. Because of our learning, I was going upwards, of course. And I got to where I was going. There was a guy with long hair, long beard, long coat, the gatekeeper. And I'm trying to justify my existence on earth to the gatekeeper. I'm like, "Oh, man, you know, the people I shot, they were other gangsters. It wasn't though I hurt innocent people, and the robberies I did, most of those were corporate companies, so I wasn't really hurting innocent people. I'm trying to justify my whole life. And he smiled, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. I got this cold shiver the way he smiled at me. And he said, "You don't get this, do you, Ron?" He said, you committed the greatest sin known to man. And I went, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble." He said, "You wasted the gift of life." And I've been clean ever since, 37 and a half years, 37 and a bit years. Yeah. It was just that revelation that was like, you wasted the gift of life. And I thought, wow, all that bad shit I'd done was nothing. All the stuff that I thought was really important of being a criminal and being, in the gangster world and prisons, and that wasn't what he was worried about. He was worried about me wasting the gift that was given to me, the gift of life. And now I have an incredible life. I have such a beautiful life. I also run a rehabilitation program, and I had a message 2 days ago from a young guy's mum and dad sent me a message. He's just turned 18. He's a year clean. Just celebrated his first year anniversary. He plays football. He's 6'1". When he did my program 12 months ago, he was 6'1" and weighed 45 kilos, 100 pounds. 6'1". He was on the ice. And we had a conversation yesterday, and at the end of the conversation, he said to me, "Thank you, thank you for teaching me the tools I needed to have a good life, and I love you." This is an 18-year-old boy saying to a 68-year-old man, "Thank you for teaching me the tools, and I love you." To me, they're the rewards. That's why we do this. This is why we do this podcast. I get on a daily basis, somebody puts a comment on my Instagram or Facebook or somewhere saying, "Thank you so much. I really needed to hear this today. I woke up this morning, I've already got messages. I really needed to hear this today." I talked about young Jack and being a year clean yesterday and all that. And people are going, I had a lady contact me from remote Australia, right in the middle of nowhere. And she said, I was coming off 100 mils of methadone, and I was going to give up. And I heard your story because I come off 120. And she said, it gave me strength to carry on. And, and then she messaged me 3 months later and goes, "I'm off the dome." So to me, that's why we do this, I'm really interested. I have a vision. I have this crazy vision. I want to put together a music show with all recovery people. I want to put a recovery show on. So, next year you might be getting a message saying, "Come to Australia and come and do a show." Because I've been reaching out to a lot of guys in the States. A guy called Eco. Yeah, Mad Child. What's the other guy? He just went #1 again yesterday. Really?
Jelly Roll?
Sorry?
Is it Jelly Roll?
Yeah, Jelly Roll's another one of them. Tom
McDonald?
Tom McDonald. These are the guys I'm trying to reach out to.
Yeah, there's a lot of great sober rappers. I run a recovery rap radio show, and there's quite a few incredible artists. And it's a growing genre. And there's people who aren't even sober making, like Jelly Roll. He's not. Yeah. He's off of opioids. He's not sober from alcohol or other, party drugs, whatever you want to call them. But he's making recovery positive music, which is cool to see.
He's heading in that direction.
Yeah.
But Tom McDonald's clean.
Well, what's interesting about him is I don't know. I think so. He talks about recovery.
Yeah.
I know Mad Child has been in and out, and I think he's clean now. I think Mercules is sober now. He's a big, Canadian rapper as well. He talks about it. Macklemore had a relapse over COVID, but he's clean again. Eminem just celebrated 15 years. There's a lot of rappers, and also some might not expect who are sober, and it's very cool.
Do you know Colucci?
Yep, he's my favorite recovery rapper.
Well, we've been communicating. I'm going to get him on the show soon.
You should. He's got an amazing message, and my favorite thing about him is he doesn't just make incredible recovery music. He talks to people through his online presence and helps them. And he just opened a treatment center in Pittsburgh. I'm sure you've been talking to him about it. Man. Like seeing someone in that position, like a lot of people who are celebrities, whether they're like rappers who started through the internet and became famous that way, like Kalishi, or people like Brandon Novak from Jackass, who got famous, like, you know, through that, and their skateboarding and, you know, all that stuff. He's opening a treatment center too, but just people in recovery, regardless of what they go through, like parlaying that into helping people. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to, like, you know, do your best. And the best thing, like you say, people hitting you up saying like it's an inspiration. The best thing I have like a job that's 80 hours a week on average. And I've set aside 3 to 4 hours a day. I try to respond to comments, respond to messages, and have intense, not just superficial attaboy, but really deep conversations with people who need help. And I got to say, it's for a selfish reason. It's not for them. It's for me. It's because that's how I stay alive.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I have a bit of a problem with the word sponsor. You know, a sponsor to me is having a logo on your chest. The guy that I've had for 37 years is my spiritual advisor. He's been in recovery for 40-something years. I've known him for 42 years. And he calls himself my spiritual advisor. He's part of the 12-step world. You know, he's been part of it for 40-something years. He took me to America back in the early 80s when they were writing the basic text. I went over there when I've got a copy of the basic text before it was written. You know, this is archival stuff before it was ever edited, before it was ever printed. And I love that stuff, you know, because, mate, we've got a movement right now. We have a movement that we need to tap into because we need to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. We need to reach out and say, you know, it's all right saying we need to reach out. A lot of them won't reach in. So, you know, when I was in active addiction, I was never going to ask for help. Not until I'd hit my rock bottom. I didn't know there was such a thing as treatment centers. I didn't know there was such a thing as, you know, recovery, fellowships programs, or any type of help, because everything was prejudiced, judgmental, and punishment. That's what I seen here. That's why I thought the society looked at me. I thought society looked at me as a lesser, a criminal, a junkie, you know. And, you know, like in the early days, I was quite proud of that junkie. I walked around, I wanted people to see my track marks. Like you said before, that was part of my identity, because I was always the man. I was always the drug dealer. But I laughed. You said something about I was my own best customer. So no matter how much on the outside I looked like I was cruising, driving the nice car, having the pretty girlfriend, I was dying. Every night I went to sleep thinking, I hope I don't wake up tomorrow. You know, that's not living. That's not love. That's not life. And to me, recovery is about love. Loving myself, loving my fellow human being. I have a saying, when I was a using addict, I was a human taking. Now I'm a human being. Because, you know, I want to be a human being. I don't want to be a human taking. I'm pretty comfortable in my life. I don't do this for money. You see, there's no ads on that on my podcasts. I want authenticity, because you can't con a con.
Yeah, I like that. It's true.
You want to push an addict away, bullshit to him. because it's like selling me bad dope. You sell me bad dope once, you and I ain't doing business again. You know?
That's right.
And I say it all the time, you know, I'd rather have a gram of pure than a kilo of fucking shit.
It's true.
And recovery is the same, man. I'd rather have one tiny little bit of authenticity than a whole bucket full of false promises and lies. You know? And I love recovery. You know, I'm a street kid. I grew up in a really I got a book. I told you, didn't I? Did I tell you that? I wrote a book. It gets released next in August. I'll send you a copy.
I would love a copy, and I'd love to have you on the radio show here on FM radio in the States to talk about it if you're open.
I'd love to, man. Love to. And you know, as I said, this is the beginning of a relationship. Everything happens for a reason. You know, I reached out to you for a reason. I'm very selective of who I'm not about numbers, you know. I was lucky enough. My wife laughs. I met Charlie Sheen before he lost the plot completely. I lived in LA. My buddy owns Sunset Strip Tattoo, who everybody went to. The Motley Crue, we went on tour with them. Charlie Sheen, David Carradine, Roseanne, Ozzy Osbourne, like just all the stars went to Sunset Tattoo, of course, you know, it's next to the House of Blues, across the road from the comedy company. You know, so everybody went there and everybody knew my buddy Greg. Greg was the best man at my wedding. And those people are great, and I'd have them on my show if they were clean and they had a message to carry. The name isn't enough. The name isn't enough just to come on the show. You know,
What you come with?
Yeah, to me, it's you know, it's like having a transvestite all dressed up, you know, and when you undress it, you find out it's a man. You know, I want authenticity. Yeah, I want authenticity. You know, I reached out to Stevie O a few months ago. He was in Australia, and he didn't even bother returning my message. And I think, to me, it's like, okay, that's cool. You might be busy, but common courtesy costs nothing. 2 minutes of your time reaching back, say, man, I'm sorry, I'm really busy. Thank you for the offer. End of story. It doesn't matter who contacts me. If my phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, I answer it. It could be someone's life.
It's true.
You know, and that's how I take this stuff really seriously. And I've been doing it a long time. My wife's not an addict, knows nothing about recovery. She's been around it for the last 11 years since she's been with me. And she goes, I don't know how you do it. And I said, I don't know how I don't do it.
It's life or death.
I have a responsibility in recovery to be there if someone knocks on the door. I have a responsibility as a recovering addict alcoholic to give the message that was so freely given to me. Because if I'd had a guy come into prison in 1981 and tell me about recovery, I wouldn't be clean today. I wouldn't be alive. And the funny part was, it's a really funny story. I'd escaped from prison and I was on the run and I got into amphetamines. So I went into psychosis. Like, the last thing you should be using when you're an escapee from prison is amphetamines, you know, like, come on, you know, you don't need any paranoia. You're already paranoid. You're on the run. And I went into visual and audio psychosis, and I thought the house was surrounded by a SWAT team. And my buddy was a plumber, and I made him cut a hole in the floor with his saw so I could escape. So what he did, he cut the hole in the floor and he pissed off because I was crazy. And he's like, I'm not hanging out with this nutcase. He's an escapee. He's got a gun. He's yelling out the top window, come and get me, motherfuckers, you know, and I'm crazy. So he ran away. And then I went back to prison and he wrote me a letter, and he was in rehab. He said, man, if you put half as much effort into getting clean as you did using, you'll do this easy. And then he started getting chicks to write to me. Because straight away, yeah, girls, you know, like, I'm going to the place where the girls are. So these girls started writing to me. So that's how I got introduced to rehabilitation and to recovery. But what happened was, the guy came out to the jail to tell me about the program. And I was that crazy I thought he was an undercover cop because he told me how I felt and how I thought. The first time ever anyone had told me, and I'm thinking, wow, he's good, this guy. He's so good. He's done his homework. And I went back into the yards where all the prisoners are, and I go, is anybody in here a drug addict? So I can learn off you, so I can pretend I'm a drug addict, because I only wanted to get to the rehab to escape, because I couldn't escape anymore because I already escaped from prison, so they had me locked in maximum security. And the funny part was I didn't even know that I was the drug addict. I didn't know that this guy was relating to me. I thought he was an undercover cop who was really smart, and I had to go back and pretend that I was a drug addict so I could fit into his world, so I could get bail, so I could run away. And, you know, fast forward 42 years, I'm sitting here having this conversation with you today, had the most incredible life. My life has been, mate, the life of a rock star without bad music. You know, it's just, and the gifts. You know, I have children, I have 40-year-old children who've never seen me drunk or stoned. You know, I have other children. I have a half American child because I lived in America for 20 years on and off. She's 28 years of age, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful young lady. I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. Their mother's not afraid of me. Now, these are the gifts. And everybody forgets to talk about the gifts, because it's important that we hear about gifts, because my addict nature is, if recovery wasn't better than using, I'd still be using. It's that simple. Because I'm still self-gratifying. I still like nice things. I didn't get sober to live in a park. But I'm like you, I work hard. I work 80 hours a week and I'm 68 years of age. I still work
like
7 days a week.
Then.
Yeah.
It's double.
But it's not work when you love it.
It's true.
You know. So you're still doing music now?
What I do here is a combination of things. Basically, what happened is I came up here for a year-long grant that was facilitated by an organization that the dude who I mentioned earlier, the doctor producer who owned the studio that my friend introduced me to, he got a grant made so that we could make an album about recovery that he produced and I made the music for. And he also worked in a consultational capacity for the music, telling me, well, that song's good, let's make it better. Let's work this thing around. He's not really a lyricist. He doesn't know music theory, but it combined classical piano and hip hop, which are my two musical passions. And, you know, I made music for years before that, kind of glorifying drugs and the lifestyle that came with it, kind of BSing and building myself up to be this grandiose character. And some of it was true, but most of it was fabrication. Or even if it was true, it wasn't for the right reasons saying it. And when I got sober, I went the other way. And I embraced, I don't know if glamour is the right word, but the poignancy and the power of absolute, raw, unvarnished truth. Yeah. And I conveyed that through the music. I didn't change the way my voice sounded, and it wasn't nearly as popular as what I did in Active Addiction, but I didn't care. Yeah. Because the people who did like it and did listen to it were people who actually understood me. And that album led to him saying, why don't you write something about these experiences? Not in addiction, but in recovery. Because you've got the artsy blog, got some younger people who like rap and experimental rap that like your stuff, but you're missing out a whole market of people from like the ages who are older than you, who might not be open to this. And so I started writing a weekly column called Clean. The album's called Clean. The column's called Clean. First column starts when I'm in rehab, that experience I told you, and I'm looking at the mirror and I don't like what I see. And it goes in a serial fashion. And every time it's not just an experience, but it's the principle of recovery I applied to get through that conflict. It's never just everything's great. It's like an arc, just like a story, but this is how life is. You don't have to write, you're like Charles Dickens or Hemingway to something. There's original, there's a conflict, and then there's a resolution, just like what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and then he leaves. So micro leads about things that happened to me, and then that led to me getting the radio show, because people in the community here in Southern Vermont read the column, and a dude who owned a radio station said, when my boss was talking to him, well, why doesn't Ben do a show? And we started that, and that led to me getting involved in social media and doing what I'm doing now. And I am still working on music. We're working on the second album, but what I've been going hardest with in terms of creation, I do one music reel every week, and I do 14 reels a week, 7 posts a week, 1 column per week, 1 radio show a week. So I am doing music, but my main platform now is using every single aspect of the thing that I am addicted to now, which is the thing I should have been addicted to all along, which is what I'm naturally obsessed with or without drugs in my system, which is words and music.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if I'm playing the music or I'm playing other people's music on the radio. Doesn't matter if I'm writing an article for my day job, which is I'm in a magazine office right now. The dude who owns the studio also owns tourist magazines here in Vermont. So in addition to writing my column, which I do for service, and the radio show, which I do for service, and the reels, which I do for service, and the music, which I do, yeah, I've gotten some gigs out of it, mostly, paid gigs to speak at schools and stuff like that. But even then, it's not my primary source of income. But what I'm really trying to do now is use every single avenue, music included, press included, radio included, social media reels and posts included, to speak shamelessly, truthfully, unabashedly, and to the best of my ability, because I am a person with an ego. I am a deeply flawed man. By knowing that and knowing I'm still doing the work, like you say, that little pinch, that gram of authenticity is better than that key of BS. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, just like the columns, just like the songs, I make 10 reels. I only post 1, because even if my mind thinks it's true, if I don't see it and I'm not like, yeah, that's something that's worth saying, I'll post it. Because my goal with this, followers, cool. Getting a paid music gig, cool. If I can get one of those messages you were talking about get one of those hugs from the 18-year-old kid that said, you helped me from the 100 pounds. If I can get a message from someone that said you convinced me to go into treatment, I would take that over friggin' $1 million single deal any day.
Yeah.
And the reason is, if I don't, like you say, put that at the forefront, I might get that $1 million and spend it on the wrong thing. And I might end up in $1 million casket instead of a $100,000 home.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have a $100,000 home and be writing tourist magazine articles with my beautiful baby child, about to go get a burrito after we finish this conversation, than have a $10 million Gucci casket because I'm glamorizing the same thing that's killing.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, there is nothing glamorous. There is nothing glamorous. There is nothing glamorous about drug addiction. Nothing. And I've been on the streets, and I've been the multi-millionaire, and I've been in the worst prisons, and I've been in the worstest prisons. There's no such thing as good prisons. But you know what the worst prison I've ever been in? That one there. That one there was the worst prison. That was the hardest one to get out of.
Oh, yeah.
The prison of my own brain, the prisons of my own beliefs. I was worthless, useless, and hopeless. I was never going to amount to anything. That is such a lie. I'm incredibly intelligent. I'm resourceful. I'm caring. I'm loving. I'm generous. That'll do me. That'll do me. That'll do me. If they put that on my casket, I'm a happy man. Another thing they'll put on my casket, as you know, my company's called The Truth About Addiction, is at least everybody knew where they stood with this bastard. I don't sugarcoat nothing. You can't polish a turd. A turd's a turd, man. You can't polish it. And people try to polish it all the time. And you can't, you know what I mean? There's a photo,
Yeah.
look. That's that young kid.
Oh, awesome.
That's
Yeah,
that
the
18-year-old boy.
He's lanky. He's 6'1".
Yeah, he's lanky, man. And he was 45 kilos.
That's pretty crazy. I'm 6'3", and I was 135 or 140 at the end, but 100, wow, that's something else.
He was dying, bro. He was dying. And I love him. He's doing really well, and he's successful. He's successful because he's been a good person. He's looking after his little brother. He's being a role model for his siblings and his kid and his little kid brothers and that. And his older brothers all love him, and his parents love him. And you can't put a dollar on that. You can't put a monetary value on what that young kid's got now. You know, golly, I was bloody 28. I was 10 years more destruction before.
Yeah, I was 24.
Yeah, I was 28 when I got clean the first time. Yeah. But
that's fairly rough, though. Like, a lot of people don't get it till they're like, 40, 50,
Yeah. Yeah, but, I've always been lucky. And as I say, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
That's right.
I've always been one of these guys that I've had a higher power that's really blessed me. I've been really lucky. My life's incredibly blessed. That word blessed is always comes to my brain, People go, man, but you spent 15 years in prison. I say, yeah, but I survived. Oh, yeah, but what did you do when you was in prison? The last time I went to prison, I was clean. I helped people. And, I helped a lot of people get clean. There's a lot of people clean today that I met in prison. So my higher power had an agenda. He knew that if I went there that I'd help people, because that's the only way I can stay clean.
Yeah. And I had someone say, it's interesting. There's people who say things, whether in person, over the phone, yelling at a cloud in the street if they're insane, and you don't know it hits you until a couple years or a couple months or something later, and it comes up in inventory of resentments. And the trouble with being someone like I am, whose character defect is a dichotomy of hypersensitivity and pride. I want to project the image that I'm stoic and resourceful when really I am a sponge for all energy, negative and positive. And I absorb it like that porous sponge until I get to my breaking point, and then I squeeze it all out back at everybody. That's my character defect. But it gets to me, and it's hard because when you're a social media creator and you're putting yourself out there, it's hard to integrate the principles of recovery, acceptance, compassion, detachment, forgiveness, things we can change. But the one thing that has really gotten to me recently that I'm saying out loud, one, to let people know that I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I still have character defects I need to work on. This is a process for transparency. And number two, because I think that there's a big misconception out there that people who recover out loud are doing it for a different kind of self-serving purpose than I understand that I'm doing it for. And when I say earlier, I do it to help myself, like helping other people because it helps keep me sober. That's what I mean by help myself. But there's a lot of people who are naysayers of podcasts, reels, recovery rap, recovery books, that apart from any fellowship violation, they say, well, there's ego, there's no humility. And to that I say, I don't know. I wish that when I was struggling in early recovery, that someone had put on a podcast like this.
Yeah.
When I was afraid to walk into a fellowship meeting, even if I had gone to one, ashamed for whatever reason, that it could find me the way it found you in that jail.
Yep.
It found my mom was in recovery. If she hadn't been in recovery, I would have never gotten where I got. And I'm just so grateful that, for every one person who may say that it's not right to speak out honestly about recovery. There are people who are in recovery, who have never suffered from addiction, who are even in active addiction, who are wholeheartedly embracing the message that not only is recovery possible, but is something that deserves to be openly and vocally celebrated. Is that something that you've seen, like, an evolution? Because I know you said, like, back in the 80s, like, it wasn't the way it was. Like, so as someone who in the American hip hop parlance is like an OG, like, in more ways than one, because, you know, you're a gangster in more ways than one, but like, how have you, and from a recovery standpoint, and in Australia too, because it's a different culture, how has the culture evolved to get to a point where people are recovering out loud? Is it there now the way it is in getting in America, or is there still work? Like, what's it like?
We're getting a lot better, because I'm the black sheep. I'm not the recovery boy for. I'm not the poster boy for recovery, and yet I am, because I did everything wrong, but I stayed clean. You know what I mean? So it's easy to do stuff if you don't take risks. When you take risks, you have to work your program harder. See, if you don't jog up a mountain, you don't need to get fit. But if you're going to jog up mountains, you need to have some good shoes on and you need to get really fit. And because I decided to jog up mountains through my early recovery, and I was still drug smuggling, and I was still violent, and I still owned massage parlors, and I was still in organised crime, I had to work this program twice as hard as the average guy who went to work from 9 to 5. Do I think that's right? No, I don't. Do I think am I boasting? No, I'm not. But that's my story, and I can't sugarcoat it. I can only tell you what happened and how it happened. And, you know, I can justify it, and I can, you know, all that bullshit, but it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. The relevant is that it is what it is, and I did what I did, and I do what I do. Today, recovery is my priority. Me to carry the message to the addict who still suffers is my number one job. That is what I do. I do it for a living, not financial, for a living in here. I'm a human being. I have to live in a world that I'm comfortable with. See, as you get longer in recovery, you'll start to understand that opinions are like backsides. Everybody's got one, and most of them stink. You know, and people's agendas for what they think I'm doing are wrong, because they don't know what I'm doing. They can only assume, their imagination. And now our disease of addiction lives in your brain. You know, we don't have a drinking problem, we have a thinking problem. Now, if somebody assumes that they know how I feel, that's their imagination. If someone judges me, that's a reflection of their own defect. I used to say sarcastically when I was a guest speaker at conventions, because I was this naughty boy who was, you know, all that stuff. For all you people who judge me, please pray for me so I can be perfect like you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to say.
Yeah, because if I'm perfect, I'm not judging you. I have to work on my own program consistently so that I don't judge you.
Yeah. And it's interesting that this hyper connected world that we live in, people are closer than ever in proximity. I mean, not where we're at. I'm in Vermont in rural America, and you're in a place where you get 2 acres per yard. Imagine that. That's a beautiful thing. Like, in cities where most people are, it's very close proximity. And even if you're not in the city, there's this, like, we're face to face, even though it's virtual. There's an onslaught of information, negative and positive, emotional information, verbal information, all of this. And as someone going back to the thing, and my character defect has always been, or neurological, whatever way you want to frame it, scientific, spiritual, emotional, it's all connected for me. But that I am not good at filtering the negative from the positive. It all goes into the same pile. And one of the primary tenets of my, oh, hey, what's going on? Good to meet you. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Just being able to share moments. After this podcast, I'm about to go to this Mexican restaurant with my 11-month-old. He's just started eating rice, beans.
Yeah, right. She loves rice.
Oh yeah, rice is awesome.
You like rice? You gonna kiss
Yeah.
her still? Bye, love you. Say bye.
Bye-bye.
She's going to daycare.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, she's going to school. She's come to kiss her daddy to say goodbye.
Well, that's it. Well, that's interesting, you know, because like being a father is something that I never thought I would be, even in recovery. And it came and it's such a blessing. And it kind of ties into the whole thing about sensitivity. I was going in a social media direction about how so many people are addicted to validation. And whether you're a creator or you're a passive observer, one can be so easily influenced by either opinion or created opinion or what you, there's all these, and I try not to do them, but I give in and I do one every week, which is a response video. Like comment response videos are the biggest thing. And I hate to say it, but 2 out of 3 of my biggest videos are comment response videos. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's not just that people have the impulse to make them, it's that other people like voyeuristically tuning into that exchange of negative energy. And I'm trying to purge of myself, but it is cathartic when I do it. But the reason it relates to parenting is I have to not only be conscious about, and you know this far better than I do, being a parent of several children at completely different stages of life and being in a different stage of life than I am, but just that revelation I'm having even now that not only is my son seeing my behavior at this infant stage, but he's absorbing my energy. Yep. So even if I act and I conduct myself and I speak in a certain way, if my energy is not right on a certain sensory level, and if he's anything like me, he'll be hypersensitive, he's going to know it. And yep. So like you say, that authenticity, that spiritual, emotional, physical, like metaphysical confluence, all of those things has to be right. It's not just for me anymore. And it's not just for the people I work with in recovery. It's my recovery is something that if I keep it at the forefront is going to help my flesh and blood. So I guess my question to you is, as someone who proudly says, just like Kalichi says, I'm doing what it takes so my daughter won't have to see me high, my son, whatever. What role has recovery played in your fatherhood, and how has it helped you, and what are like the lessons that's given you? Just as someone, I want to know, because like I'm still.
I have a 40-year-old daughter who's 16 years sober.
Wow.
And she runs a drug and alcohol detox center. She's a nurse.
That's amazing.
And she got clean because she's seen me in recovery. She's never seen me not in recovery. She was born in rehab. You know, I met her mother in rehab, you know, and my other kids are not in recovery, but they're fully aware of a drug addiction. I don't hide anything. I don't hide. I believe in the truth. The truth will set you free. But the biggest thing that you touched on was, it doesn't matter what I say, it's how I act. My children pick up on my emotions. They don't listen to my words. If I'm aggressive, if I'm angry, if I'm frustrated, if I, project this horrible feeling towards, my wife, my children will pick up on that. So they keep you really honest. And I got a 7-year-old boy who pulls me up for swearing. I have a swear jar. And if I say shit, I got to put $2 in the jar. And he's got this jar full of money, and if I swear, he goes, Dad, $2. Being a father is the second greatest achievement of my life. My recovery is still number one. Because if I'm not in recovery, I'm not a father.
Right.
Everybody laughs. When I used to say that years ago, people used to get freaked out about it. Without recovery, I'm not a dad. Without recovery, I'm not a husband. Without recovery, I'm not a friend. Without recovery, I'm not a human being. And it's really important that I always remember that.
Well, one of my favorite, not to get back to this negative place now that we're talking about all this positivity, but one of the most common comments I'll see in the thousands of comments that go through this weird virtual, it's so crazy we're having this conversation over like data tens of thousands of miles across the globe. It's so mind-blowing to me. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Like not even the people who made like 2001 A Space Odyssey could have like ever conceived this. But the one comment I hear again and again is, which just kind of makes me laugh because I'm like, well, you're right. And I'm proud of that, is, wow, it's like recovery is your entire personality. And I'm like, you're right. It's my whole personality. I'm grateful that it's my whole personality because I am nothing that I am in active addiction now. And if I revert to those properties, those attributes, I repel to them, not just the drink, not just the drug, like a hot flame. I'm like, whoa, that resentment, whoa, that anxiety, like, ooh, I'm trying to distance myself.
Greed, fear, all those great things that come with active addiction. Yeah, I don't want that shit, man.
And so if someone says recovery is my only person, that's the ultimate compliment to me. That
Thank
if
you.
I am an embodiment of detachment from the need for chemical instant gratification and how I act, and that's manifested in my personality,
yeah,
then I've won.
Exactly.
And that's
exactly
what I'm trying to be. And it's just, I'm 6.5 years in, but I like to think all I have is one day at a time. And how do you keep that day? And it's beyond the chemical now for me. I'm sure it's beyond the chemical now for you, 40 plus years in, but it's the emotional piece, man. It's the spiritual piece, however that manifests. And I'm past. I mean, I'm not gonna say past. It could have a bad day, go back like that, and I need to keep that real forefront of my mind. But I don't even really remember. I remember the escapism feeling it gave me. I don't remember what crack or heroin feels like, really. I don't even really remember like what other substances feel like either. I remember but I remember the urge to escape my problems. And even though a chemical doesn't do that for me today, there's other means. And I don't know. It's a constant battle, that emotional recovery piece, that spiritual recovery piece, keeping it at the forefront when the gifts of recovery come in. And the gifts bring challenges, and they bring challenges that are greater gifts than I could have ever imagined in addiction. But I can have a stressful day and that anxiety piece comes up, and that's when that muscle of gratitude comes in, and I got to manifest it. And that's one of my favorite things about doing podcasts like this, whether I'm interviewing people on my show, being a guest like here, making my recovery content, my recovery music, is that I don't claim to be perfect, but like, I'm able to manifest the growth that I want to be by speaking it into existence and reminding myself. And I don't think that's hypocrisy. I used to be insecure about it. Like if I said something out, like manifesting a positive affirmation, and I didn't believe it at the time, like it was BS. And maybe it is if like I try to tell someone, oh, well, you should be grateful like me, and I'm not feeling grateful, to project that. But when I'm not feeling grateful and I reflect on the importance of gratitude, like I used to have to buy a 200 bag of dope to feel grateful. Like now I can get that for free just by reorienting my perspective. And I wish someone had told me that.
Yeah.
That
100%.
Free. Like it's not the same instant hit that overpowers you physically, but I can be that change that I used to pay money, slave over, throw up in the morning when I didn't have it. Like that's free. And we're free. That's incredible.
I got good news for you.
Yeah.
It gets better.
That's what I like to hear.
Man, I'm 37 years and 2 months clean, and I'm excited. I get excited every day. I wake up and I'm excited. And they told me, when I was 5 years clean, it gets better. And you think, it can't get any better. At 10 years, it gets better. It can't get any better. 20 years, it gets better. It can't get any better. 30 years, it can't get any better. But it has. And what got better was I got better. My understanding, my the way I process, the way I act, the way I think, the way I react. These days, because I was a pretty fiery guy, I had a really short temper. And today, you know, somebody can say something stupid and I get the feeling and my brain goes, not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. Where before my brain was like, are you challenging me? My ego became involved. I'm going to put this guy in his place. Does he know who I am? You know, all the ego bullshit. Now it's like, not relevant, not important. You know?
I can do that a couple times a day. I'm getting, I think I'm like 40 or 50% average these days.
I probably get cranky once every 6 months.
Once every 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get upset, I'd say. Really upset. I don't count the little things where I like self-correct. I'd say like once to thrice a week is tough. And I was, you know, when my life was simpler, it was, I don't know. These days when I get upset, it doesn't really phase me as much as it used to. Even when I didn't have as many stressors in early recovery, it was almost like the same way I've gained tolerance for drugs in the past and active addiction. I've gained spiritual tolerance, although it still has a lot of work to go for the same things that would have highly set me off before. And that just comes down to experience, like you say. I'm the first to admit I have a long way to go, but I'm actually grateful for that.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. It's very exciting, and it's purpose and it's fulfillment and it's uncharted territory. And when I was using substances to explore that space, it was very limited. Like I thought I was, everyone talks about expanding your consciousness and your world with substances. And maybe in the beginning, like alcohol will take you on a drunken adventure, stimulants, the same thing, you know, downers will take you out of your body. But at the end, it just brought my world so small. A 4-block radius, then a room, then a bed.
Then the curtains pulled. The darkness, you know, and the darkness is a reflection of our soul. You know, my using is a reflection of my soul. My recovery is a reflection of my soul. Yeah. The more I shine internally, the more I can shine externally, you know. But something's really important to remember is you're a human being first, you're a man second, and you're an addict third. It's really important to remember that. As a human being, we're going to be flawed. As a male, we have to keep our ego in check because that's our enemy. And as an addict, we have a program. We are so lucky that we have a program. There's so many people out there that don't know that this program even exists. We talk about it like it's normal. But there's millions of people out there in active addiction, in pain, that don't even know this program exists, that don't know this way of life's even possible. And that's why we do this podcast. That's why you're doing what you do. I feel I have an obligation to share what I've been given. It's not a job, it's an obligation for me. I must do this. I am addicted to carrying the message of recovery because how I beat this disease is one addict at a time.
Never heard that one before. That's beautiful.
That's my war. My war against drug is one addict at a time. And that's what we're doing. You know, we're trying to help people. We're trying to carry a message of hope. You know, I'm a hope dealer, not a dope dealer.
Yep.
Yeah. You're
I've
part
heard
of that.
that one doesn't get old.
Yeah, hope cartel.
Yep.
You know, I give hugs, not drugs. You know, all those little cliches are really cool, you know?
Yeah, I used to resent the maxims and the cliche expressions until I encountered situations in my own life through my own experience where I used them and I gained my own version of them. See, I thought they were corny until I realized that they worked in situations that I was confronted with in recovery. And then I gained my own understanding of them. But I had to do that. I had to live the sayings before I understood their power. No one could tell them to me I had to experience them. Just like everybody told me drugs were this, drugs were that, and then I experienced them for myself and formed my own experience. It's the same thing with recovery. And I had a great experience. A friend of mine who long had been worried about me in my active addiction, and when we were growing up, even early 20s, he had never really struggled with substances that I did, but it escalated. It was a slow burn for him. He's a club DJ. He drinks doing party drugs, but it took him to a tough place emotionally, mentally, and somewhat physically. And he's like, well, I'm so scared to get clean. I'm so scared to give this up. And I said, well, it starts with an idea. It starts with a seed that gets planted. Let me ask you something. Some people, they drink everything the first time, but even if you're getting drunk for the first time, it starts with that first sip. And are you willing to take that first sip, that first hit off the joint of sobriety? And then pass it, see if you don't like it. And he's like, yeah, I think I can do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about rocketed into the fourth dimension, but in order to get rocketed, you got to light the fuse. And it doesn't start with a huge explosion at once. It starts with that wick going or that ignition flame. It always starts little. And it's saying that easy does it, one day at a time. It's just so much wisdom there, man. And yeah, I used to hate those sayings, but those analogies, and that's what I try to do in the reels, is think of analogies and kind of ways of incorporating the concepts that redress them and take them in ways that my mind was able to incorporate them in, the lessons. And that's why they're so powerful, those analogies and those shared experiences. Because everybody knows, if you say hope dealer, everybody knows about the dope dealer, but they never thought about it in the context of hope until they go in recovery and they go to some fellowship.
Yeah.
And then they understand that the same way they can fiend for dope, they can fiend for hope. But they weren't hearing that out in the street until they experienced it.
You got to feel it, man. You got to feel it to deal it. I say it all the time, And it comes back to that same thing. You can't con a con.
That's
if
right.
You haven't tied up my shoes, don't try to walk up my hill.
Yeah.
And it's really important that, just for the day, I can do anything. It's really important that I keep everything in today. We're going to have to wind it up because we're running out of time, but man, it's been a pleasure. It's been a really, really lovely pleasure, mate, to have you on.
Likewise.
You're a good human being. I believe this is just the start of a connection for both of us.
Likewise.
I really do. I believe there's a lot more for us to share. So from the truth about addiction, thank you very much. Thank you for taking your time out. And man, we'll keep chatting on another format, and we'll try to get some shit together.
One day, one show at a time.
Thanks, Benjamin.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.